Okay, good evening, everyone. Before I introduce tonight's speaker, Dr. Jeannie Johnson, I want to say a few words of thanks and an introduction as well. So the thanks go to all the people that make Science Unwrapped events possible, and it really is a long list. There's the Science Unwrapped committee, and what I always forget to say is that I chair that committee, and my name is Greg Podgorski. I'm Associate Dean of the College of Science, in addition to chairing the Science Unwrapped committee. But of all the fun things to do, the Science Unwrapped committee is by far the most fun because I get to do these things. And in addition to the committee, USU Media Productions is immensely helpful in this time of COVID-19. And I want to thank our volunteers who have stuck with us through the COVID-19 pandemic to produce a really interesting set of science videos. And every time I give this introduction, I say you should go to the website, but I just want to call your attention to our Science Unwrapped website and a few of the sites that people have developed for at-home activities. How about Pascal's plungers and thumb wars? How about physics in slow motion? What about blow super bouncy bubbles? I mean, what fun can you have? You can have worse fun than that. And then just going down the list, Halloween heart thumper. And we've had some of that here tonight. Let me tell you, even though it's not Halloween. And then exploring how information changes from the Nora Eccles Harrison Museum of Art. So there are a lot of things to check out there, and thank you very, very much to all the volunteers. Let's see, I'm going to give an introduction now to Dr. Jeannie Johnson, and Jeannie, I say I'm really excited for your talk. And you know, I'm going to turn now to the camera. Looking at you, I've really met Jeannie just in the last few weeks, and it's been a pleasure. And I don't even know where to begin, right, for your introduction, because let me start, try to make it logical. So I'm going to turn back, okay? Jeannie is a Utah native, grew up in Ogden. She graduated with a bachelor's and a master's from Utah State University. After, and you can correct me if I have this wrong, but after Utah State, Jeannie went to the East Coast, specifically to the Washington, D.C. area, where she worked for a number of years as an analyst at the CIA. Then she transferred to the State Department. And somewhere along the way, she found herself stationed in Zagreb, Croatia, during the bombing campaign by NATO forces right around the turn of the millennium. And related to that, what she saw in that campaign, she realized that our intelligence failed in a number of important ways, and that there was a significant amount of human suffering, loss of life, which didn't have to be if intelligence sources were better. And Jeannie then spent the next number of years developing new approaches to build in cultural awareness and cultural factors and models that would predict how populations would react to military campaigns and other, unfortunately, stressful solutions. Mm-hmm. Somewhere along the way, and again in the introduction, I can't keep all the details straight, Jeannie wound back at Utah State University, right, after a PhD in the University of Reading in England. And she's been with us for the last 5 or 6 years.
20.
You've been here 20 years?
I've been here 20
Told
years.
you I didn't know. All right. So you've been here 20 years. This is amazing. Okay. Mm-hmm. And, okay, in that time, now maybe 5 or 6 years ago, okay, right, you founded the Center for Anticipatory Intelligence,
right,
which is a really, really ongoing, exciting, multidisciplinary operation that involves so many different people and so many different ideas. So it really interesting, fun, and fascinating. I'm trying to think what else, but let's circle to the topic of tonight's talk, because Dr. Johnson tonight will speak about, your precise title is not up there, but is the dark side of Dataveillance. Yep. And you'll find out what this is all about in just a moment. But your talk falls so squarely on the theme of this year's Science Unwrapped, right, which is Brave New World. Right. And there's the sort of intersection between science, mm-hmm, society, ethics, mm-hmm, in a really powerful way. And the final thing I'll tell you before I ask Jeannie a question we've been asking all our speakers is that I really had to twist her arm to speak at Science Unwrapped, and Jeannie said, well, I'm not really a scientist. And yes, you are. And in terms of looking at how science intersects these areas, boy, there's no one I can think of who would do a better job for being right in the middle of that.
Oh, that's nice of you.
So thank you. Okay, so let me ask a standard question, but a really important question. So, Jeannie, how did you get to be where you are in your career, and how would some of the young people in the audience tonight follow? I don't think anybody can follow in those footsteps, but kind of come someplace close?
Well, I love that question because it's fun. I love to hear the answer to that question from other people who have interesting careers and life paths. And I think something important to keep in mind is that you don't necessarily have to have an A to B plan. So this is a big, amazing world, and we live in a vibrant, diverse country, and that gives students the chance to sort of create their own path. And in many ways, that's what I did. So after having graduated with my master's degree here, I was actively recruited to CIA by an officer in residence here at Utah State. But I had two other options on the table at that point. So could have gone two other different paths at that time. But one of them that wanted to hire me, when I told him I was also interviewing for CIA, said, "What are you doing with me then? Like, get over there. That's going to be an adventure, you know?" And something being fun and an adventure is a criteria I weigh seriously. So I chose the path of CIA. And then, you know, I'm lucky to be married to a husband who's willing to take risks with me. So even though CIA was terrific, when I figured out that the analytical modeling wasn't working that we were using, and we decided maybe to take a leap back to Utah and come back to Utah State, he was game to do that. So game to move to Croatia, game to come to Utah State, and then jointly decided that a PhD was probably the right move, so was also game to move our small family to England. So marry well. That's my first piece of advice. Yeah, choose a partner in your life that you can go on adventures with, and that you make a good team. And so from there, you know, really it was following problems. So here's a problem. I'm going to tackle it. I'm going to be willing to take some risks, and then move on to the next problem. And in this most recent problem, the establishing the Center for Anticipatory Intelligence, I've had a whole team. So there's no part of that I did by myself. So I have a co-founders, Matt Barrett and Brianna Bowen, and they helped launch this from the beginning. And jointly, we kept following that formula. Follow the problems, figure out a way to solve them, follow the next problem, and build curriculum that keeps reinforcing success in that pathway.
Yeah, I wish there was a shortage of problems, but
yeah, we're going to be well employed for a very long time. In fact, one of the T-shirts that our students from CAI, that's what we call ourselves, the CAI, CAI, one of the T-shirts they were wearing all of last year was, "I was studying existential threats before 2020 made it cool." Right? So we are not going to run out of threats and problem sets, and so my students will have gainful employment, you know, far into the future.
I think that's a good introduction to your talk, that we're not going to run out of threats, because you'll share some with us tonight.
Right.
Yeah. And the final thing I'll say before I'll step out is that as you have questions, please submit them to the question and answer feature of our Zoom webinar. Submit them during the talk, and please, right after the talk, get your questions in here. We'll take questions until about 15 to 20 minutes of questions after the talk, and I'm going to step out and turn things over to you.
All right, everyone. Hello. Thanks for being with me tonight. I've been really excited to share this talk with you and tell you a little bit both about our center and some of the kinds of issues that we track. I also need to give a major shout out to Miles Robertson, who put together my slides for me. So just so all of you know, the slides are a lot more fun because I had help from some of our fantastic CAI students. So as you can see from your screen, the Center for Anticipatory Intelligence is in the business of thinking through emergent technologies and how those technologies might impact our society, sometimes in really terrific ways, sometimes in ways that may prove threatening and that we need to address and we need to prepare for. So today we're going to talk about one of those. And this particular one may be the most impactful across your lifetime. And it's something called Dataveillance. So I want you to think about if there were a way to watch everything that everyone does. On your way to work, on your way to school, while you're in school, while you're at a concert or hanging out with friends, and everything you do inside your home. Not just watch everything you do, but begin to predict what you're going to do next. Not just predict what you're going to do next, what you're going to buy next, whether you're going to act out in an angry protest, or whether you're going to go to sleep at home, but how you feel. If you feel happy, if you feel angry, if you're catching the flu. That seems pretty comprehensive, and it maybe even seems impossible. Science fiction writers have explored a world like that, and one of the most famous is George Orwell's 1984, where he envisioned a force called Big Brother, watching everything everyone did and using that surveillance to keep people in line. All of that technology, and far more technology than Orwell ever envisioned, is available now, and it's called Dataveillance. So Dataveillance takes that word surveillance, to watch and surveil, and combines it with the data trail that all of us leave behind every day. So that data trail comes in the form of the things we tell Alexa. Every time you ask Alexa for something, or Siri, or Google, that's part of your data trail. Everything that you do on your phone is part of your data trail. Your phone tracks your geolocation every minute of the day. In fact, phones are so good at this that someone collecting the data on your geolocation can tell whether you are an adult or a child just by where you carry your phone, and thereby can target ads directly to your phone that would be age appropriate. Every swipe of a credit card, every time you pick a show on Netflix, all of that is data that is being scooped up about you and contributes to this thing we call Dataveillance. In addition, every app that you use on your phone collects data on you about your preferences, your modes of interaction, your thoughts. And that data has become the currency of our time. So if you think about the fuel of the 20th century being oil, and that's what made people rich, and that's what fueled economies. In many ways, data is the fuel of the 21st century. These apps don't exist to serve you. These apps exist to collect data on you and sell that data to a third party. That's how important and valuable that data is. So the next question is, why is that data so valuable? Who wants it? Who wants to buy data about you? And this leads us to the topic of artificial intelligence. In order for artificial intelligence to work well, it has to be fed lots and lots of data. That's how it learns, that's how it adapts, that's how it becomes better at whatever humans have created it to do. So a simple definition of artificial intelligence, a term that was coined clear back in 1956, if you can believe that. A simple definition is that you have a computer system that is performing functions that had traditionally been associated with human intelligence. Now, I know that's not a very precise definition, but there's a lot of contest of opinion about what the precise definition should be. So in some ways, it's easier just to show you a few examples. Anytime you post a picture to Facebook or Instagram or any other platform, and that picture automatically pops up with tags with your friends' names, even though you haven't told the platform the name of those friends yet, it already knows them, it's using facial recognition technology. That recognition of one human face distinct from another human face is artificial intelligence. So that's something that used to be the purview primarily only of human minds, and now a machine can do it. We see the same thing with voice recognition. How many of you have tried to say, "Hey Siri," and open someone else's iPhone? You can't do it now because one of the protocols when you get a new iPhone is to say, "Hey Siri," 3 times to your phone, and that's all that's required for your phone to learn your particular voice imprint and be able to open the phone only for you. So that's voice recognition. Some of these go much further. So Google Translate has become better every year at translating from one language to another because the AI algorithms that run Google Translate are taking in more and more data, learning, and getting better at what they do. Now, some of these have pushed into a territory that we would call artificial intelligence agents. This means that the artificial intelligence algorithm has been given a task to do and quite a bit of autonomy, in other words, independence of action, in completing that task. So believe it or not, the AI agent can become creative and innovative. Now, really, we've had some interesting examples of this that were considered groundbreaking. One was the DeepMind AlphaGo artificial intelligence agent created by Google that beat the best human champion at Go on the planet. This was a pretty big moment because the game Go requires a lot of creativity and skill and strategizing and innovation. So for an artificial intelligence agent to beat a human was kind of a big deal. That happened about 3 years ago. In 2020, we had an AI agent put together by Heron Industries beat an F-16 combat pilot in combat. So not live combat, simulated combat. But still, again, this was a little bit of an earthquake for humans that an AI agent could beat one of our best Air Force F-16 pilots in combat. Now, let me make this just slightly creepier for you. In an early experiment, 2 AI agents were pitted against each other. And remember, they're supposed to learn and innovate and be creative in playing tic-tac-toe. Now, I don't know the last time you played tic-tac-toe with anyone who was older than about 5 years old, but it almost always ends in stalemate, right? Both of you can make moves, so nobody wins tic-tac-toe. So these AI agents were playing against each other until one finally figured out how to win tic-tac-toe. It killed the other one. That's how it won. So it loaded the other one's algorithm with a sort of overwhelming amount of scrambling data until that AI agent crumpled. So in effect, killing its opponent and thereby winning tic-tac-toe. Now that is probably not the innovation that the creators had in mind when they had 2 AI agents play against each other. But it's something we need to keep in mind as we think about any kind of system that we make an autonomous, in other words, self-directed AI system. So one of the things that these AI agents have been asked to do is surveillance. And surveillance becomes a happy cycle for an AI agent, because the more it watches, the more data it can scoop up and bring in, and the more it learns, and then the better it gets at its job. So as we talk about this, I've given you some pretty creepy examples of what could happen. So I want to follow that up with a really cool example, even in the world of surveillance. So my students will laugh about this, but there was no way I wasn't going to work dolphins into this talk. One of a science fiction book that I have been reading, and it was written in 2013, looks at artificial intelligence actually helping us to talk to dolphins. So think about this for a minute. If we had cameras, the way the science fiction book outlines, in the dolphin enclosure and audio devices, so that any way the dolphins choose to communicate, whether it's through verbal cues and chirps, or whether it's through special movements in their body, eventually the AI algorithms, by absorbing all of that surveillance, watching the dolphins night and day, they would get a complete set where the dolphins aren't doing anything that they haven't seen before in communication patterns. Once they got a complete set, they could begin to crack the code on dolphin language so that humans and dolphins could actually talk to each other. Now that may sound a little bit fantastical, but a Swedish AI company that specializes in language translation has taken on the challenge. And they are confident that they will break the code on dolphin language this year, in the year 2021. So I hope they're right. I hope they do that. But imagine what a breakthrough that would be for humanity, to be able to actually communicate with another species. So that's a really cool application of a total surveillance mechanism. So now let's look at a maybe less cool application of total surveillance. This is something being tried out in China called the social credit system. The social credit system right now is just being piloted in some areas of China, but with the expectation that it will soon be nationwide. Not just nationwide, but rather used as an export to other countries. And here's how Dataveillance through the social credit system in China works. If you're walking home from school, maybe you decide you don't want to use the crosswalk, so you jaywalk across the middle of the street. Your phone will send out your geolocation, and instantaneously, because you chose to jaywalk, your social credit score, which you're seeing there on the top of your screen, will drop. This is the repercussions of this are so fast that by the time our young lady on the screen makes it home, her punishment will be that her internet speed is slightly lower. There are all kinds of behaviors like this that are micromanaged through the social credit system. Everything from eating on the subway and bugging the people around you because they can smell your lunch. That will drop your score. Playing your music too loud, your neighbors don't like it. That will drop your score. Searching on the internet for something that the government doesn't want you to read. That will drop your score. So as you can see, this social credit system, through a series of facial recognition cameras spread all over the region where this has been implemented, and through access to every individual phone and every individual credit card and everything else we do electronically, including all your connections to the internet, they have achieved a near complete dataveillance system that allows people to know exactly where they stand with the government in any moment in time. Now, what that means is if you have a bad score, you can't get into the school you want to go to. If you have a bad score, your travel privileges get taken away. If you have a really bad score, you may be jailed. If you are in sufficient debt, so you owe money to a lot of people, the ringtone on your phone automatically changes to alert people around you that you are someone in a lot of debt. As you might imagine, This has proved to be a very effective mechanism for controlling behavior within the population. People want their credit score to be high. So the picture you see here is a group of Chinese young people showing you their credit scores. You can check your credit score any minute of the day on your phone. You know exactly where you stand. The other picture that you see is just a group of people moving through a hallway with facial recognition cameras set up, marking exactly who they are as they walk past. So this is a surveillance state. Now, when we look at that kind of setup, one of the worries is that as China chooses to export this technology, it will have the effect of empowering dictators around the world who want to keep their populations in check, who want their populations to behave a certain way, and maybe even control the information flow coming in and out of their country. So this is something we're profoundly concerned about. That is a real threat to democracy. So one question you might ask yourself is, for one thing, why are these Chinese young people smiling? Why aren't the Chinese rebelling? Why aren't they doing something about this at the popular level? Well, the answer is a bit complicated. Dataveillance isn't all one thing or all the other. There are some benefits to living in a highly predictive society. When asked, many Chinese citizens say, I like the way it encourages trust between people. I know that you will hold up your end of the deal because if you don't, your social credit score will drop. So it's easier for me to trust you. There's less crime. Life is really predictable. I know exactly how to get where I want to go, into the school I want to go to, the travel privileges I want to earn. I know how to get there. So it affords me a really predictable, stable way of living. So that's on one side of the ledger. The other side of the ledger is a very real incursion of privacy and erosion of liberty until we end up in a situation very much like the Orwellian 1984, where we are ruled by really authoritarian figures and there are real limits on freedom of action and even freedom of thought. So that's worth considering as we march forward. So let's look at a couple of examples of where dataveillance is used in the United States. And you can decide, is this something that increases trust and even fairness and predictability? And I kind of like it. Or is this something that is too much an invasion of privacy and our personal lives and we should get rid of it? So one of the first ones that you might be thinking of, because maybe it's even been offered to you already, is in the world of car insurance. So if you're a young man and you're going to get your license when you're 16, you are in the highest bracket for paying premiums, meaning just because you are male and you are young, you will be required to pay a really high premium on your car insurance because statistically, you get into more accidents than someone my age who is female. So those statistics will work against you. So what if your car insurance said to you, hey, what if you allow me a little bit of dataveillance? So I put a GPS tracker on your car and it tracks how fast you drive and whether you brake too often and whether you get in wrecks. And it just tracks your pattern, whether you're driving really late at night when you're tired or you're mainly driving during reasonable hours of the day. And if you qualify as a good driver, then you have really low car insurance. If instead you decide to get a little crazy, then your insurance will go up. Now, on the one hand, that's fair. Good drivers have lower car insurance. On the other hand, what starts to happen if we keep saying yes to all of these schemes, because your medical insurance is going to offer the same thing. Hey, strap on a Fitbit, and then we are going to track how much you exercise, your heart rate, in truth, all of your bodily functions, everything going on in your human body to the extent that they can will be tracked by this Fitbit. And if you're healthy and you're working on becoming healthier because you get out and exercise, we will lower your medical insurance premium. You won't have to pay as much for it as someone who isn't taking really good care of themselves. Again, is that fair? And the right people pay the right amount of money into the insurance pool? Or is that a pretty serious invasion of privacy? There are no laws prohibiting this or even really evaluating it yet. There have been cases brought in court, but not a lot of legislation. All of this is still in a really open space. So let's look at the next example for some of you who are headed on your way to college and to a university. Right now, universities are some of the most Dataveillance heavy institutions in the country. Students are tracked everywhere. Every time you swipe your student card, every time you log on to the Wi-Fi inside a university, every time you use your equivalent of an A number like we have here at USU. In addition, some universities have invested in these Bluetooth trackers that you see on the walls in our animation. And so they track everywhere that a student walks, who's in class, who's not. And they do all of this with the really good intentions of helping boost retention, of noticing when a student is in distress, and so reaching out to them, hey, we haven't seen you for a while. You haven't logged on for a while. Are you okay? And intervening potentially with students who are having a crisis of some sort, a health crisis or a mental health crisis, and they need some help. So it's all with really good intentions. But some argue that we are taking young people precisely at the time that they are transitioning to adulthood, and we are making them really comfortable with comprehensive dataveillance. Is that a good thing? Is it not a good thing? So another place that dataveillance is making strides forward is in the world of robotics. So right now, most of our dataveillance is happening from either fixed structures like a facial recognition camera that's mounted, or these Bluetooth trackers that are mounted, and that is beginning to change. So this is Spot. He was visiting our classroom. You can see him on your screen. He is a robotic dog. And we thought he was pretty cool and frankly kind of cute. And you can see that the students are having a lot of fun with him. Well, dogs like Spot now have a new job. So here is the Spot equivalent, nicknamed Digidog, who is helping police forces monitor a neighborhood. Digidog is mounted with cameras that you can see there on your screen, and those cameras surveil the neighborhood. Sometimes Digidog is told to go into houses if the police deem that there may be a belligerent person who might even be dangerous in the house. They send the Digidog in first. And it can even carry small cargo and walk upstairs. So I want you just to take a moment, look at Digidog, and think about Digidog walking around your neighborhood, taking pictures of you. You're out riding bikes with your friends, and here's this digital thing that comes along, scoops up a bunch of data about you, looks at your face, goes down the street. And I want you to think about how that makes you feel. Like at first it might be kind of cool and novel, like look at that Digidog. But what if there are 5 of them walking around in your neighborhood all the time? How does that make you react? How might it make your parents react? Some have claimed, I think rightly, that it is really dehumanizing to be surveilled by a robot walking around in your neighborhoods. So something to consider is that these digital dogs, these Digidogs, have been deployed in some of our poorest and most underserved neighborhoods. Right now, they are in neighborhoods of color, like the Bronx and Queens and Brooklyn in New York. So some of these AI advances that are controversial, our nation has decided to try out in minority neighborhoods. And that's not fair. It's not right. So if we think it's controversial, it ought to be tried out on everyone at the same time so that we are all reacting to it, so we all feel the repercussions of it, so we can decide as a society where we want to land on this kind of technology. Again, there's no legislation yet deciding if this is okay, if this is not okay, because the technology is advancing faster than lawmakers are able to keep up. So more and more advances are happening with no laws to define whether it can or not, or it should or not. We haven't had that national conversation. So as you envision the future of this country, what kind of future do you want? How much dataveillance is appropriate? Do you want to walk down the street and have facial recognition cameras that have assigned you a number, keeping track of everywhere you go, where you shop, when you go home, and be able to also collect that information from commercial devices? Right now, in the United States, lawmakers are not allowed to go out and collect facial recognition data themselves. So the police can't do that themselves, but they can buy it from commercial entrepreneurs who have created apps to do this. So the most famous, that was actually teed up by your Science Unwrapped host, the most famous of these is Clearview. So Clearview decided, the police can't do that in the United States yet, but no law saying we can't. So they scraped, it's called, gathered in images from Facebook and Venmo and corporate websites and anywhere that your picture is posted on the internet. And they made their own facial recognition repository. Then they sold that app to law enforcement. So through this kind of circular mechanism, Dataveillance and facial recognition is making its way into the United States and into law enforcement. Now again, you have a lot to weigh out in deciding what you think about this. Does it help catch more perpetrators of crimes? It's hard to argue against that. It does. Is that a price that we want to pay in the United States by way of invasion of privacy and basic liberties? That's a question that your generation will probably have to answer. So Gen Z, as you grow up and take the reins, this dataveillance question, it's on you. So thanks. Happy to answer your questions.
You've given us a lot to think about, and there are no, sometimes there are clear answers, but a lot of times there aren't any clear answers. I'm going to take the few questions we've gotten so far. So early in the talk, Elijah wanted to know something that I think you touched on a number of times, but it gets at this. I'll read the question directly. What do you say to people who say they don't care because they have nothing to hide?
Yeah.
What helps them realize their freedom is at risk? And you can tell which side Elijah is on. But what do you say when people say, I don't care, I'm not doing anything wrong? I can hear my mother saying that, actually.
I know. Well, and in truth, Elijah, I remember hearing this even in the hallways of USU right after the 9/11 attacks, when people were saying, hey, the FBI should just tap everyone's phone because then we can finally find the terrorists. And so what you've struck on is a really important question, and a question that has a challenging and difficult answer. So one thing that I often say is I paraphrase Benjamin Franklin, who said, he who is willing to get up an ounce of liberty in the name of security will end up with neither. So having the conversation with people that the more liberties they turn over, because they say, this doesn't bother me, I don't care, they will eventually end up in a space where those liberties have shrunk so far that they don't exist anymore. And they often do it with the assumption of benevolent leadership all across that horizon. So something that you could maybe do in conversation, and that I do from time to time, is pick a scary figure from history and say, if this person was in charge, would you be comfortable, if Hitler was in charge, if Stalin was in charge, if Saddam Hussein was in charge, pick your malicious dictator from history. If that person was in charge, would you be comfortable with them having this power over you? Would you be comfortable with having given up that liberty? And if the answer to that is no, then they maybe need to rethink the way that they are meting out that balance. Because the framers of our particular country framed it up specifically with an eye toward avoiding the abuse of power, because they knew that humans by nature, all across human history, if they come into too much power, they tend to abuse it. And so if we allow that concentration of power to take place, then we are simply inviting its malicious use. So I'm sure I've just said things that you already know and maybe you've already thought about in conversation, but that's the place I usually try and start.
Thanks, Jeannie. Yeah, it's amazing how words from more than 200 years ago resonate. Yeah, so much. It's really amazing. Another question is about legislation from an anonymous attendee. So do you know of any legislation at the state or national level control the use of digidogs, robocops, these types of devices?
Right. So to answer your question, just keep watching. We're talking about something that has hit the street only in the last couple of months, in fact, last couple of weeks. So already different cities are suing to say that can't happen here. And it's getting attention from certain members of Congress as well, who are saying, why are you testing this out in largely minority neighborhoods? That's wrong. So it's already causing a bit of a dust up that will end up in the courts, and then the courts will have to begin to decide some basic precedents for this. Now, here's a really important point, though. The courts aren't the ones who are supposed to make legislation. That's supposed to come from Congress and from congressional bodies, right? Legislative bodies at the state level. So we're having lots of decisions being made in the courts right now that don't have kind of legislation to back them up. The courts are just having to make up novel or brand new precedents without any legislation to reference. That's a problem. And so you're starting to see in some states and even in some cities where they are legislating on these issues. For instance, Boston has decided there will be no use of facial recognition cameras or software citywide. So that's a Boston decision, but it's not a Massachusetts decision yet. So you're starting to see this kind of pop up at the grassroots level, but you just have to track it because we have very little, in fact, close to no legislation at the federal level, right? At our large congressional level. It's just happening kind of in cities and towns, sometimes states, and primarily through the courts.
Yeah, thanks, Jeannie. I mean, just adding to that, it's amazing the different pace of technology versus legislation.
Exactly.
And especially in a divisive time. And the genie's already out of the bottle.
Yep.
And it does some good. And so maybe we shouldn't put it back in. But anyway, I'm going to look at these questions and let's see. There's one I'm worried about. Let's see. Do you use social media? And do you think people should stop using social media? I mean, that's another one. Jeannie's out. But yeah.
I have a Facebook page, and it is primarily to remind me of when it's someone's birthday. So if you go look on my Facebook page, you will see it's very underpopulated. There are a few pictures of me, but not a whole lot else. I do not have Alexa in my home. I will not use the facial recognition on my iPhone. I don't have any other social media applications. I was required to sign up for Instagram because my son was on the cross-country team. So he does some meme searches every night to show me the best of what the internet has to offer by way of memes, which is really entertaining, but I don't use Instagram myself. So, that's my choice. Those aren't a part of my life. And obviously, I think it's important to also recognize my background, right? So the lower my digital footprint, the better for me, because of my intelligence community background, but honestly, the better for me just in general. So I have to combine that comment with China. One of the biggest hacks that China ever pulled off was stealing the identity information, so like social security number, birthday, all of that, of all federal employees. And I was one of those federal employees that had my data stolen. So in some ways, China already owns my identity, so you would think, well, why do you even care then? But I do have to confess, knowing what I know, just instinctively, I keep my digital footprint small online. And it gives me a sense of a little bit more control over that domain. Now, do I think everyone should do that? That's entirely over to you, because different lifestyles, some lifestyles utterly require a vibrant Twitter feed, for instance. And I'm not going to tell that person not to do that anymore. And we've seen whole movements inside other countries be coordinated and inspired through those platforms, movements that may not have otherwise taken place, and that were sort of rally cries for more freedom. And so it's hard to draw a clean line and say this is a bad thing, this is a good thing, which is why our conversation tonight is so complex and complicated and multifaceted.
Yeah, thanks, Jeannie. I think we're maybe only two people in the world that have such a small social media footprint.
I know, right?
With a T-shirt title, I'm a Luddite and proud, or considered Luddite. But
that's right.
Let's see. What subject should we study in high school to learn more about dataveillance?
So interestingly, this is a topic that we were discussing just today, that there should just be, in general, more cyber awareness, and so that you're taught better cyber hygiene practices in high school, and really a much stronger emphasis on what are the costs of giving up privacy. Because what I have noticed in Generation Z is that there does tend to be this attitude of, I'm being watched all the time anyway, there's not a lot I can do about it, so oh well. And I think the important thing would be to have teachers, maybe your political science teacher or maybe your data science teacher, who really engage in the conversation with you of, you are going to be the political, the community, the business leaders in the next generation. You have to figure this out. The technology is racing ahead so fast. You have got to figure out where the lines are and where you want to draw the lines for our society, because our society really will change if those lines aren't drawn. You as an adult and your kids will grow up in a very different social space with a far different set of freedoms if you don't begin to act and have those conversations now. So maybe don't wait for your teacher to do it. Maybe you're the one who raises this issue in the classroom and gets people talking about it.
Thank you. Let's see what else we have. What are some examples of cyber hygiene?
Okay. So using a VPN, for instance, using complicated passwords and making sure that you use different passwords for different platforms and applications. Now, I know I'm saying things that you've probably heard 100 times before, but honestly, it's the little things that make a big difference. Learning how to spot phishing schemes. So still, most cyber hacks today are through just very simple human error. that allows a malicious actor to sort of enter into a system and exploit it. And so and I had to relearn this lesson this week because I got one of those sort of fake emails from my boss, and I didn't check to make sure that really was his email address before quickly replying, and luckily nothing came of it. But it was like, one of those reminders to me to make sure you check the email. You know that is his email before you reply with any personal information. And in truth, I think your generation is far more savvy about this in many ways than my generation is. You guys are already doing a better job. But those cyber hygiene practices that are really basic are vitally important, because as you get a job, you become the weakest link if you don't practice those basics. And hackers will make their way into a whole corporation just through you. So let me give you a vibrant example of that. In Iraq, during the Iraq War, a group of insurgents were trying to infiltrate or hack into the US Department of Defense computer system, and they weren't having a lot of luck from the outside. So here's what they did. They left a flash drive in the men's bathroom. So they knew that there was a high likelihood that curiosity would just kill someone. They wanted to know what's on that flash drive. So they picked up the flash drive in the bathroom of a shared space, went to the nearest DoD computer, and stuck it in. And that's all that was required for a massive hack into the DoD system, the Department of Defense system set up in Iraq, because somebody just stuck an unauthorized flash drive into their own computer. So that's what I'm talking about. On just those small human errors can have massive consequences for a whole system.
Yeah, I've certainly heard the flash drive hack
Yeah.
before. And actually, I'm going to turn to the audience again. Related to strong passwords, one of the science activities on the Science Unwrapped website from the Air Force ROTC is how to construct a strong password. So go watch.
Perfect.
Yeah, go watch. And I think that's it. Let me just see. We've answered her question. So Jeannie, I'm going to say thank you,
You are
very much
welcome.
for a wonderful talk.
You are welcome.
So thanks very much.